start out talking about this beneficial ownership information. If you are not aware of this, if you're not familiar with what's going on with this particular piece, there's a filing requirement that, most small businesses are going to have to take and do. And if you don't, you could be subject to fines, different things like that. So today we want to give you the information that you need to understand it and know whether or not you need to do this and when you need to do it. So Bruce, you want to kind of give us an overview of everything going on with this, and then we'll kind of jump into some specifics.
Sure, be happy to. So yes, this was actually enacted in 2001 as part of the Corporate Transparency Act. And then it was launched, the BOIR, Beneficial Ownership Information Reporting Requirement, launched January 1st of this year. So there are 3 groups of businesses in terms of your reporting timeframe. If the business existed prior to January 1st, 2024, that business has 12 months to complete their registration. So it must be registered prior to January 1st, 2025. Any business created in 2024 has 90 days to complete that filing from the data formation filing with the Secretary of State. And then any business formed after December 31st, 2024 will have just 30 days to complete that filing. There are penalties for failing to file. I believe there is $10,000 maximum penalty and up to, 2 years in prison? It's escaping me, but the most notable, 2 years in prison, fine up to $10,000. Those are criminal penalties. And then the civil penalties is $500 per day as long as the violation exists. So definitely worth the 10 or 15 minutes it takes to complete the filing, to drop on and complete that process, and it is free. So it's really not a lot to worry about there. And it requires information you already have.
So what's the point of this? So what are they trying to do with this?
The aim is to give law enforcement agencies from every level of government more information to help reduce or eliminate money laundering, financial crimes, drug trafficking, these sorts of things. So they estimate that that there's about $800 billion in that is laundered through the United States every year. And that's just the United States. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. They're focusing on shell corporations, shell businesses, which are the primary offenders. Not that any business doesn't have potential, but that's what they're aiming to do. And yeah, that's that in a nutshell.
Okay. So as a small business owner, and I just put in the chat where they need to go to file. And we talked about kind of why the government is looking to do this. Are there any businesses that are not subject to this?
There are 23 classifications of businesses that are not required to complete a BOIR filing. Trying to find a page for that. There's a specific list of industry types, and these are going to be business types that are already reporting to a government agency in some form or fashion. So banks, credit unions, insurance companies, large businesses, which are typically corporations, are already completing those sorts of filings. So there's some details there. That's on the FinCEN website. So if you're concerned, you have questions about that, drop on there, and it's pretty easy to navigate. As Mike and I were exploring earlier, sole proprietors are a unique animal. So if you have an LLC or a corporation, chances are good that you're going to be filing this report. If you're a sole proprietor, you probably aren't required. So one of the litmus test is, did you create a separate business entity with the Secretary of State? And sole proprietorships are not separate entities. The individual and the business are one and the same. So most sole proprietorships will be exempt.
Okay, so that's good to know, because we were looking at it today, and the challenge is, so we've put in some links in the chat for you. There's some PDFs that you can download that can help you. When I look this up, I just put in beneficial ownership information, and it gives you links and different things like that. So you can gain a lot of information there. They've got a lot of stuff online that can be of assistance to you. But
I'm dropping the frequently asked questions page in there as well.
okay, great. So I guess my question is, so you went to a meeting last week, or I believe, with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty's office regarding this particular program. And I appreciate that they're trying to get the word out. And, I think a lot of the IRS and Treasury is trying to get the word out right now. But, how are businesses supposed to know that they were going to need to do this? I mean, we started getting information from, I believe, the IRS about this, and then we were given a heads up at our statewide meeting, but that wasn't even super clear at that particular time. So that was about November of last year. My concern is a lot of businesses are just not going to know what's going on with this. Mm-hmm.
Right. And there were attendees at last week's event that voiced that same concern. So Congress, like in Joyce Beatty's office, they're working with Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the IRS to get this information out there, as well as the Small Business Administration. So they are sharing this on webinars. They're publishing it to YouTube. They're launching it on their websites as well. Most Secretary of State's offices across the country are partnering with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network to make businesses aware that this reporting requirement started in January. So that information is out there as well. And then agencies like the Small Business Development Centers, we're working on that as well. So, and as the year goes along and that deadline starts approaching, there's more and more buzz out there. So I think that will continue to filter out and people will hear what they need to hear. So if you're an attendee and you know other business owners, make sure you share the information, just let them know. FinCEN is not looking to entrap people. They're not getting crazy. And actually what they're kind of looking for is businesses that either provide incorrect information or don't register at all. Those are going to be their red flags. People who are dodging those filings. So there's nothing to worry about, and it's an easy process.
Okay. One of the questions in the chat, if it's a single member LLC, do they have to file?
Yes. If you created a separate entity for the business, then you'll need to file, unless you're one of those 23 categories that FinCEN outlines on their website. But single member LLCs, yes.
Right. So I think the way they kind of lay it out, the couple key points there: are you creating a separate entity, and are you working through the Secretary of State's office to do that? So if you're filing a corporation or an LLC, you're going to go through the Secretary of State's office to start with, and that's creating this separate legal entity. And again, as Bruce mentioned, straight up sole proprietors don't have that requirement because they're not creating a separate entity from themselves. Basically, they and the business are the same things, correct?
That's right. And even if you register a trade name or a fictitious name, it's still not a separate entity. It's just a name that the sole proprietorship is using. So.
Okay. And that goes, because this is what we were looking at this morning. So that's the same thing as if you have a sole proprietorship and you decide to go to the IRS and you want to get an EIN number, that's not creating a separate entity.
Correct.
Right. So you would not have to file at that particular point. But if you are an LLC, if you are a corporation, you would need to do that. S corps really are tax filing. So it goes along with the other entities. So if you are an S corp, or you're going to form an S corp, you really are creating an LLC or a corporation before you create that S corp. So you are creating a separate legal entity. So you would still have to file.
Correct. Yep. I noticed in chat here, Angela asked, if the business is registered with the state but is defunct, is there a requirement to file? That is a good question. Yes, the business must still file. If it's active according to state records, the business is active and needs to be registered. The only way that you would be exempt from that is if you closed the business prior to January 1st of 2024. So as it stands, you'll need to register for 2024. If you decide to close it later, then you would also go back and notify them.
Okay, so let's talk for a second about that. So what would you say? So a little bit separate from the BOI piece at the moment. Defuncting a business. What would you recommend they do to do that? I believe there's I don't have the form numbers, but there's forms that you fill out to make sure that you're basically shutting it down with the Secretary of State's on.
Yep. There is that depends on the entity election. Before doing that, if you have any, you need to make sure that you filed your last tax return for the business, that there are no outstanding debts. And then there's a series of filings that are done with the Secretary of State to make that happen. So if it's a corporation, that's one process. If it's an LLC, that's another. If you have a sole proprietorship and you have a trade name or a fictitious name, that's a pretty simple process. But and then depending on how established the business is, you may have accounts with the Ohio Department of Taxation for sales tax. You may have an account with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services that will need to be closed as well. So depends on your structure and then how established the business is and whether or not you've got employees. If you have questions about that and want to talk that through, I'm happy to help. So.
Okay, great. So we've got a couple of questions here in the chat. I don't know if you can see those, Bruce.
Yeah.
Carrie Griffin, sole proprietor without a partnership. It's my understanding during the research via the IRS BOI information, if sole proprietor, you still must go through the exempt process and be approved to be exempt from filing. Are you aware of this?
I'm not, Carrie, that's good information. So if you would do me a favor and send me the information you found, that will give me a good starting point and I will research that and then make sure everybody on our team is informed. I reached out to Financial FinCEN this morning asking them about the reporting requirements for sole proprietors, and their response was, provided it's not a separate entity, there is no requirement there. But if there's an exception there, I'd be interested in learning about that.
Yeah, and that's great information. We appreciate anybody in the chat putting anything they've come across, because again, this is a kind of evolving, so the information that is in a lot of the documents all really revolves around that separate entity component. So it's important to have that. We have another question here. If you have an LLC, but hold on. The messages are coming fast and furious. I can't keep it up here. If you have an LLC, but 100% sole owner and file Schedule C, is a requirement for that situation?
Yes. If you're an LLC, you will be filing.
Okay. And again, you've created a separate legal entity with the Secretary of State's office to do that. Yep. That's really, I think, the key.
Okay.
If we're owned by a private equity firm in another state, do we need to file? That's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. I don't have a response for that one because that is too complicated. So that would probably require reaching out to the FinCEN, letting them know. The private equity firm would definitely be doing their own filing. Whether or not they're required to file for any of the businesses that they own, couldn't say for sure, and I wouldn't want to mislead you. So definitely reach out to FinCEN, see what they say about that.
Yeah, I mean that would be good to check that out. I did see something today that when they're looking at the owners, so they're looking at the beneficial owners, they are looking at 25% owners too, correct? That's a number that was in this document.
Yeah, and I'm dropping in chat here. This is the link to FinCEN's contact page, so you can drop your question in there and they'll email you a response.
Yeah.
Yes. So the qualifications for who is a beneficial owner is anybody who has more than 25% or more ownership in the business, but that's not hard and fast. It could be somebody owns less than 25%, but they have substantial management responsibilities in the business. So if they have the ability to say, fire members of the board of director or fire senior leadership, even though they're not a primary owning more than 25%, they will still need to be included in that filing. And to be clear, there's the filing that's for the business. And then in that filing, there is the individuals that have beneficial ownership in the business. So you can detail those people in that single filing. It's not as if each member goes and files separately. There's one filing for the entire business.
Right. And Jack, as I look at this again, I would highly recommend you reach out to the entity that's covering this. But if you think about it, my guess is that the company was formed. There's an ownership percentage of the private equity firm, whether they own 100% or not. So my guess is you probably will have to file. But again, that's something I would definitely check into. What information we're going to need to actually file? It's another question we have.
You will need, depends on when the business was formed. If it was formed prior to January of this year, you will need to report who is actually completing the filing at that moment, and then who are the beneficial owners. And this will be names. You will need IDs. That needs to be an unexpired driver's license, state-issued driver's license, could be an unexpired passport. There's a list of acceptable document types there. You will upload ID. And then some other information that you already have, the address for the business, email address, phone numbers, those sorts of things. So nothing crazy, no tax returns, no financial figures, no legal documents, nothing like that.
Okay, great. I know we put some stuff in the chat here. Rick Slark, former guest, is looking. Is there a comprehensive single source for this info?
There is. Rick and I posted that to chat. There's a 5-minute video there. If you visit the FinCEN's channel on YouTube, they have a lot more information there. Very detailed webinars. I think there's the 5-minute here is the simple walkthrough for the process. So they're making the information available and they've had it at a single place.
Okay. Great. And like I said, if anybody has any more questions, be sure to put that in there, even if we kind of move forward. Bruce, do you want to mention again the dates and times? So they formed before January, they're formed this year, they form next year. Again, you want to, I know you touched those earlier, but you want to touch those again?
Yep. Yeah, I'm also going to pop that into chat, so it is here for everyone. So businesses formed prior to 2024 have until January 1st, 2025 to complete that filing. So if your business existed before New Year's Day of this year, you've got a year to complete the filing. If your business is formed this year, you have 90 days from the date of formation to complete the filing. And then if you form the business next year, 2025 or later, you have just 30 days to complete that filing.
Okay. So my assumption is that going forward from January 1 of 25 going forward, they're basically, if somebody forms a business, they form an LLC, corporation, whatever, they're going to have 30 days to do this.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the Ohio Secretary of State is cooperating with FinCEN, so they're making that information available on that page. So as part of the process, you should be notified that you need to complete that filing as well.
Okay. Great. So let's see here. So you file this. What's happening after that? So I file this. Am I gonna have to do something every year, or am I gonna get some notification? I gotta answer something. I mean, what's going on from there?
No, it's just one filing. You give them, report the information to FinCEN, and it's done, unless something changes. So if ownership changes, the business moves. If it was operating under a social security number and gets an EIN, any kind of update like that will need to be reported. But so long as the business doesn't have any changes, you don't have to update it. There's no annual filings, nothing like that. And they won't reach out to you, as I understand it, and ask if the information is correct. It's the business's responsibility to keep that information current.
Okay. Great. Do you know if there's a confirmation that comes once they file?
There is, when you're on the portal completing the filing, once you complete it, it will give you a transcript and then a receipt. So it's really good information to make sure that you download that, save it, print it, and you need to have access to that. If you need to revise your filing, you will need that information to do that because they will be assigning you a unique identifier, unique number for your business. And that's what you would use to complete updates.
Okay. And what you just said, once you file, you're filed unless there's some change, because that's one of the questions. They have to do this every year. But
Right. And
we're
Teresa,
saying
I don't believe they email it to you.
right. But if there's not a change, once you file it, if you haven't moved, you haven't changed owners, you haven't done any of that, your filing should stay status quo and you shouldn't have to redo it.
Yep, exactly.
All right, great, great. And so we have a question here, and I don't know if this is kind of the same one as for if the LLC is inactive and if terminated in 24, do they have to file? So if they've maybe already terminated it or.
Yeah. Salim, it depends on what you mean by inactive and terminated. So if you actually completed all of the paperwork necessary to dissolve the business at the state level, paid all of your outstanding taxes, those sorts of things, the business actually ceased to exist in 2024 or 2020. Do you need to complete the filing? That's a good question. You're talking about 2024 this year, not last year. I'm going to look into that one, Salim. I'll take your information down here and I'll let you know what I find about that.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Great. Okay. And you can see we're still trying to figure everything out ourselves. So any questions you guys put in there is great.
And that is very true. And it was yesterday that everyone was notified that before signing in was a very simple matter. You just drop in and start plugging in your information. And now they've layered an identity verification process on top of that. So you have to do that first before you can complete the filing. So there's still building the plane while it's in flight.
Right. If I recall, when I looked at the filing portal, I mean, obviously I can't get that far into it because it requires you to log in and all that. But I think there's a space where you can start accumulating your stuff, and then you can save and then go back to it.
My understanding is this is all done at the same time. You cannot save your work and go back to it. Now, if they've changed that, I'll look into that.
Okay. Trying to get back there. It's easier said than done.
Right.
Hold on here. Yeah. He's taking me the questions, so I'll have to figure out where I was when I did this. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So so where do people go if they need assistance for this? We put some stuff in the chat to go directly to them. Was there anything else that maybe got put out when you were working on this?
In terms of looking for somebody to help you with the filing,
Yeah.
You're not required to use an attorney or an accountant, though they may be able to help you. Of course, they'll charge. They intentionally designed the platform to be as easy to use as possible and to require as little information as possible. So you can do it yourself. If you want help, we're certainly happy to help here at the Small Business Development Center. Feel free to reach out to us.